Welcome. I'm Doug, and this is Dying to Retire, a podcast on retirement and then some. If you've been here before, you may have noticed things look a little different. I've been running this show as an audio companion to my YouTube channel, so I have the same content, just the audio. Now that's changing going forward. The old YouTube audio versions are coming down, but what stays is everything I made original for this channel. I'll still be covering my retirement, the house being built in Guatemala, the residency process and all. That's still over there on YouTube on Dying to Retire podcast. If you must go over there to see the face that's made for radio. So just go over there. There will be some crossover, but if you want the full experience, unfiltered and explicit, this is where it lives. All right, let's get started. I want to start today's episode with an update on Casa Douglas, our home being built outside of Antigua, Guatemala. I want to tell you where we are in the process and my plans right after I take delivery. First, the wife and I are dealing with the master construction schedule. The builder calls it a chronogramma, and hopefully I pronounced that correctly, right, Mark? The builder is pushing hard to get it to hit or to be completed by the new, air quoting that, mid-July deadline to wrap up the construction on Casa Douglas. Remember, it was supposed to be May. Now it's towards the end of June or middle of July, sorry. My realtor is practically going there to the job site multiple times a week. That's okay. She actually lives around the corner in a neighboring community, so it's really not that far out of her way. As I said in a previous episode, I would rather have it done correctly and right than done fast. Now, the house is almost complete in reality, which is great news. And I will be putting up new photos. Actually, there are a couple short videos up on my YouTube channel shortly. That said, the interior is going to be empty. And when it's turned over to me, when I take delivery, there's not going to be any beds, no chairs, nothing inside the structure. Now, I'm heading down to Guatemala in early to mid-July. And one of my immediate missions, or priorities, however you want to call it, in addition to meeting with the lawyers to finish up some home ownership paperwork, is to start work on purchasing furniture, arranging the deliveries, and turning a dusty construction zone, actually I hope they vacuum it and dust it before I get it, into a location where the wife and I can actually live, and especially me, because I'm going to be the one there for a while first. I need to ensure the appliances are also installed, that they're working, the water's working. I need to get a washer dryer, one of those over-under units installed as well. Now, some people will say I'm cheating. Yes, I'm a cheater. But because I have engaged, and this is because I have engaged a designer there to help me furnish the home rather quickly. She knows which stores to visit, including the ones selling quality used furniture. She knows how to coordinate getting those pieces delivered directly to the house. And that bit of logistics that they will bring to the picture, she will bring to the picture, is worth the money. And she knows I'm working on a strict budget. And trust me, I've laid this down. It is a very strict budget. And the plan is to furnish the house in phases. Ergo, she is there to help assist me in phase one. What is phase one? The basics: bed, beds, dining room table, chairs, couch, maybe a swivel recliner. I may be roughing it for a few days, hopefully not weeks, in a sleeping bag or going back and forth between the new home there outside of Antigua to the family home in Guatemala City, but a lot of that is TBD at the moment. For those of you thinking about making similar leaps overseas, abroad, however you want to call it, understand that living in paradise, or what you will see as paradise, sometimes comes with specific rules. And like many places in Central and Latin America, the number one rule is the plumbing rule. You do not flush your used toilet paper down the toilet. Nope. You put it in a handy trash can next to the toilet. And it's easy to find because it smells. Now, many tourists, not just Americans, get squeamish about this. But in fact, it's a fact of life in Guatemala and other countries in Central America and South America. It is not everywhere, but it's primarily in the older homes, in the older neighborhoods. That is pretty much a given. Now, this brings me to this past weekend where I was at a family cookout here in Maryland with my wife, where my wife and I attended. And the point I want to make, this past weekend at that cookout that we attended, how can I say this? My wife's cousin's husband, he and I were talking because we were one of the few gringo husbands there, right? So we were sitting down talking. Now, I was showing him the pictures and the new videos of the house and how it was coming along. He was happy. It's like, hey, it looks great. It's got a lot of natural light because and it does. The electricity wasn't even on, and there was so much natural light in the house. It's insane. It's fantastic. All good things. And I'm like, oh, by the way, and I'm paraphrasing what I said, but this is exactly the point I made with him when I was talking. I said the plumbing is good because you can flush your paper down the toilet instead of having to put it in the waste basket next to the toilet. So I'm going to have to, and the reason why I'm saying this is because I realized I'm going to have to put signs up in the bathrooms, especially the guest bathroom, that basically says, please put the toilet paper down the toilet. Don't put it in the trash can in the bathroom because the natives, when they're visiting, will want to do that. And then I added, by the way, I have a bunch of bidet toilet seats I'm going to ship down. We're going to put them in boxes and ship them down. And that's going to help too. And he just looked at me and goes, oh, good. Thank God. I've been trying to find a way to ask you this and wasn't sure about how to ask you this. We were joking around. He said he talked to his wife and he was like, I'm not sure how to ask you, but you know, but he goes, oh, this helps me out, helps him out a lot. 'Cause- But all in all, I thought it was funny because I know James and his wife Myra will visit a lot. They do like to travel and stuff. They also like to travel on the cheap. So having the house down there and being down there where they don't have to pay for a hotel or too many hotels, they will really like. And to be honest, many Americans get squeamish about this, wiping your ass and putting the paper in the waste basket instead of flushing it. For us gringos, this is not natural. It is alien to us. And that is one of the reasons I decided to build in this gated community because it had the classic look, but was very modern. And the plumbing in Casa Douglas is very modern, meaning you can actually put your shit paper down the drain without causing a disaster. But I'm also doing an extra step to protect the plumbing infrastructure. Like I said, I'm getting boxes ready to ship down, basic household goods, maybe one or two boxes. And just by the way, a side step on there, it takes about 25 to 28 days for a box to go down there, travel time. But the caveat to that is it's based on the days, the 28 days, the counter, the timer, however you want to call it, starts the day they ship down there, not the day they pick up your stuff, but the day they ship down there. So sometimes they only ship twice a month. So you have to have the counter, the countdown clock start at the time they ship it, not when they pick up the box from your house to get ready for delivery. And just where you know that, but I digress. What's going into one of the boxes, like I mentioned, is a modern bidet toilet seats, the ones that use the current water pressure, not heated, not electrical, but they're going to go in each bathroom. There's total of four bathrooms, 3.5 baths. So I got four bidet seats, very nice ones that will go down there. In addition to the clean feeling, bidets also drastically reduce the amount of toilet paper that is always going down your drain. And let's be clear, and I'm not trying to be an environmentalist here. I just appreciate a clean ass. Take that however you want, but it does solve problems. So let me ask you this. If you moved abroad or you're planning to move abroad, what are you going to miss? What is that one thing that you're going to miss? It can range from proper plumbing to anything else. Let me know. Send me an email at dyingtoretirepodcast@gmail.com. This whole thing reminds me of how living and traveling abroad often brings a whole new set of rules and social norms that actually seem foreign to us. This brings me back down memory lane a little bit because in the 1980s, while it was not Central America, I was in Japan, and it was very different to say the least. I mean, think about how we watch TV outside of the US bubble. Between high-speed internet and streaming, it is easy as hell to stay connected to American sports and news, if you're willing to pay most often for an expensive streaming subscription. But back in the 1980s, let's talk about the culture shock. Now, after my first tour of duty, my first duty station in Yuma, Arizona, I got shipped off to Iwakuni, Japan for a year. And let me set this scene how our barracks would normally be. All the barracks usually had a big giant day room in which there was always a giant TV. We used to joke around, call it the MTV room, but a lot of times people would put movies up and stuff on there. Or if there was a big sporting event, we watched it. Now, back in our rooms, usually one of us, especially in the NCO rooms, we would have bought a TV. I think I bought a huge 26-inch Toshiba TV back then. And so we'd have TVs in a room. What was the culture shock for me was when I turned on the TV and moved beyond AFN, Forces Network, and watched the local Japanese television, in particular, the variety and game shows, because you could try to follow soap opera, it's not going to work, but game shows and variety shows, you actually can follow them a little bit. And let's talk about eye opening. And I mean, they literally had segments where, in one TV show we used to watch, where pretty young Japanese women would take showers in a see-through shower stall while the show's host sat back and watched. And when she finished her shower, they would judge her performance. Now, the thing is, it wasn't anything sexual, not like what you would see on HBO, late night HBO or Skinamax. It was just nudity. And, and I wasn't naive back then. I've been to plenty of strip clubs. Hell, I'm a Marine. But I did grow up in the sticks, where we really didn't have cable. We were lucky if we had 2 to 3 TV stations on a good day, and PBS was always gonna be one of them. So, I'd seen topless women on American television before on PBS, thanks to the Brits and I, Claudius. But wow, you didn't have to speak a single word of Japanese to appreciate the female form. And this is likely why so many young Marines ended up marrying young Japanese women, because they weren't shy. But also, you realized what I was watching over there would absolutely fried the brains of an American censors back home. I'm not going to try to be crass here, though I am kind of straightforward, but to really understand the sheer shock and how this broadcast was. I've been to Canada, I've been to Mexico, I've seen regular TV on those different parts of the world. Didn't understand them all, but I've been there, right? Some French TV, what the hell, right? If the young lady taking the shower had what we now call a Brazilian, then the broadcast would show full frontal nudity right there. They didn't edit anything, no problem. If she was what we call all natural, that 1970s look, the overgrown azalea bush, that part of her body would be blurred out. It would be censored. Now, your brain's going, why the hell would they do this? Because one looks more intimate than the other, and it is. But from what I was told back then, it was because of some old bizarre censorship rules left behind from when General MacArthur was running things during post-World War II occupation of Japan. You can't make that up. So, to all your veterans out there who may be listening, or anyone else who lived abroad back in the day, did you ever experience that type of cultural whiplash where you were stationed or living overseas? And what was the craziest part you saw on TV? What made you stop and think and go, wow, I cannot believe they put that on television? And two, they would never get away with that in the United States. Just let me know, send me an email. Now that we've established back in the 1980s, television abroad, even in places like Japan, it could be a little wild but still very entertaining. But back then, the primary purpose, especially with game shows and variety shows, was just that, to entertain. And they succeeded in doing exactly that. But today, we are witnessing a completely different story and purpose across all different media platforms. Entertainment isn't just entertainment anymore. What we are seeing across media platforms today isn't just news and entertainment. It is a calculated push by activist groups and talking heads from organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center, who have literally built a lucrative business model out of manufacturing controversies just to line their own pockets and stir up problems, when and where in reality there weren't any. And it's like the meme. The person performing CPR has a label in front of him called, labeling him as Democrats. The person on the ground is CPR. And the person doing the CPR, the Democrat, is screaming, "Don't you die on me." And honestly, the ultimate target of all this type of misinformation is them trying to keep all of this on life support using your and my tax dollars. And if you spend 10 minutes scrolling through social media from X to TikTok, you'll see these influencers, or you see influencers and so-called experts pushing ridiculous shit like this. And they're experts because they worked at a think tank, went to school, got a useless degree on it, or used to work on the Hill. Recently, they have claimed seniors, and this is the other thing, they're going after the older people, seniors with adult children who have moved out of the house should be forced or pressured to give up their homes so that the younger generation can move into those homes, all under the guise of a thing called social economic fairness. Look, it's not fairness. This is some Pol Pot, Joseph Stalin shit with a little bit of Nazism thrown in. And I don't think for a second that these online comment sections on these social medias represent real public opinion. There's some in there, but not a lot because there's so many sycophants jumping in saying, yeah, you go, girl, or whatever you want to call it, right? But many people think it is. These social comments these comments on these media platforms will piss you off because a lot of them are rage bait. These forums are flooded with trolls. They're flooded with disinformationists, people who push fake or worse, incomplete statistics with no context. And in my opinion, they're wanting to breed this generational hatred. It's coordinated in order to pit the younger generation against the older generation and somehow make the younger generations from millennials, Gen Z, whatever, believe they somehow have a right to your wallet, your wealth, your home, and more. It is the same kind of psychological manipulation seen across Europe several years ago. Look how Germany completely let itself be derailed by youth-led environmental activist campaigns like Greta Thunberg's and the others. They have basically allowed these children to dictate the national energy policy. And they had all these sycophants and people jumping on, you go girl shit, right? This resulted in them shutting down all of their nuclear power plants and crippling their own energy dependence. Now, years later, there was a research paper done, and I wish I can find it, but I'll pull it up if I can. What was funny about all of this, a lot of the people who were behind Greta Thunberg, behind the environmental activism, behind all the studies they were throwing out, were financed, her shit talking was financed by organizations from Russia or being paid by Russia. And you're going to have to ask yourself, why would Russia be involved in Germany or Germany's energy policy? Well, it's pretty fucking simple. Germany buys the majority of its natural gas and oil from Russia. It's used to heat the homes and power the energy grid. So it was basically an environmentalist campaign that Germany bought hook, line, and sinker. They shut down all of their nuclear power plants and forced themselves to buy from Russia. It was a psyops campaign that worked. The German leadership basically neutered the whole country because Russia told them to. To make matters worse in Germany and most of the EU right now, bureaucrats are now choking things off due to environmental regulations on such things like home air conditioning. They're trying to phase out standard refrigerants and bringing in these new things, which driving up costs for having an AC or an alternative that just puts the massive financial squeeze on regular residents, right? And we're seeing consequences right now while the continent is going through these summer heat waves. And here's a statistic that mainstream media completely ignores. They don't want you to see this. According to public health data, more people die in Europe every year due to heat than Americans die in gun violence. Remember, America's a really bad place. We're terrible. No, they have like 3-4 times as many people dying due to the heat. And the vast majority of the people dying are the elderly. Like they didn't kill enough people, the elderly people during COVID with bad COVID protocols. It's like these policies that they're doing are all targeting old people, all because of environmental disinformation, and regular citizens are paying the cost. Now I'm going to do a little side story because it's related. I had a story from a viewer whose adult kids in Massachusetts were treating her like an unpaid servant. They demanded free chores, expected constant childcare, and showed her zero respect while lecturing her while she was there on her boomer privilege. You know what she did? She said, fuck it. She drew the line in the sand. She packed her bags and she moved away. She now splits her time between Florida and Canada. These stories and stories like it don't get printed because they're anecdotal, but most people don't print them. They don't make the cut with the shit that's being pushed out by the people who are trying to divide younger generation against older generations. My question, has anything like this happened to you? Be it your kids or grandkids or somebody else's kids, I don't really care. And I'm saying kids because anything under 40 is a kid to me. Have they told you that you were privileged, you had it easy when you were growing up? Has this happened to you? And this is coming from people telling you how to live or how you lived who weren't even born yet. They weren't even a thought in their daddy's groin. Just let me know. And while activists push disinformation narratives from a distance, there are times these ideas, these occurrences land actually a lot closer to home. My brother in law stopped by the house the other day. He is about 50 years old. He was there to pick up some things for his oldest daughter, who is about 30. She and her 10-year-old son recently moved back with him. This is the grandnephew that we're planning to come visit us during the summers so he can get in touch with his heritage, but give his mom a break during the summer, at least for a couple weeks, right? So the plan is for him to come down to the house in Guatemala for the summers, which is interesting because and I know it's a side note, the school is not out in Guatemala in the summer. School is out in Guatemala November, December, and parts of January. That's how they do their school years. They actually have it on the year, right? The lunar year, not a fiscal year, almost like the way we do it in the States. To give you a little background on the family dynamics, my wife was born in Guatemala. You guys heard me say that a lot. Her brother was born here in the States, but they're both Guatemalan. But my brother-in-law grew up fully immersed really in the American Black culture. And let's just say he has an undiagnosed identity disorder. For the longest time when he was growing up, he walked around with that one pant leg pulled up, emulating the rapper LL Cool J, who did that back in his day. Now, his kids are all mixed. They're both Black and Guatemalan. Beautiful kids, great kids. Well, he recently landed a new job as a frontline manager. And listening to him tell the stories from work is a case of pure, beautiful karma. For years, my brother-in-law was the guy who railed against managers, complained about leadership. They didn't know they're taking care of the work, taking advantage of the workers. The whole socialist trope, right? It's just insane watching it. And at that time, for the past 20, 30 years, I've always been a manager from beginning to middle management. And now that he is one of the people in charge, and it's a great career move for him, but oh, the irony, oh, the karma, however you want to call it. It's just delicious. He was telling us about an incident that happened in his job recently. One of the employees under his supervision, who happens also to be Latino, not Latinx, Latino, pulled him aside and said, "Hey, we're both Spanish. We need to stick together." My brother-in-law looked right at him and said, he didn't know what the man was talking about. His job was to do his work, do a good job, and everything would be perfectly fine. Now, that is flawless, a no-nonsense response from a new manager. That's the way it should be. Later in the day, the wife and I were chatting in the car about that exact story. And I told her that in my 30 years of being a manager, including my final 20 years serving in the federal government, and my years of federal contractor before that, I never once heard a group of white guys get together and say, "Hey, we need to stick together because we're white." Never once heard that. However, I will tell you, I've heard and actually said, we need to stick together because of our age, because we're a bunch of gray haired, balding guys. I've done that. We do it in jest and we joke around, but we have that camaraderie. I've also said, hey, we need to stick together because we're veterans, because we need to make sure we're checking and taking care of our veterans. I've done that, but it's never been based on race. So this whole situation reminded me of a good friend of mine from my working days before I retired. And at one point in time, I was actually his boss, his supervisor. He's Black, Puerto Rican mix. He's got great funny stories about that growing up. And I'm a white guy, and he's my age. We used to joke around constantly. We told off-color jokes. We still do to one another, and we could talk openly about racial topics. We would frequently agree to disagree, but it never reached the point where we didn't have each other's back. Our friendship isn't based on the color of the skin. It's based off our shared experiences. We're both veterans from the 1980s. He served in the Air Force, I think a little bit longer. I think he did 12 years. I was in the Marine Corps. I just did one hitch. We were both in Japan and the Philippines at the same time back in the 1980s. And yes, we used to joke about LBFMs too. I can say that because my current wife doesn't listen to the radio broadcast. But seriously, this is a real unshakable bond. We are good friends. I'd love to do a radio show like this with him because it would be censored in some places. It would have to be. But on this type of format, we'd be able to get away with it. But it would be perfect. And it would be very entertaining. Getting back. Now, I guess things are different with us because we're different generations. I had another former coworker who was also a fellow Marine. And later on, I found out when our offices were next to each other, when we're chatting, we were in the Corps around the same time, though he stayed in for, I think, a full 20. We both arrived at the same duty station at the same time. That's kind of funny. Him as a freshly minted second lieutenant, and I was I think I was PFC at the time. And the funny thing is, his people's barracks used to be behind us in PMO, and I used to arrest his people. So we started talking about it because we probably ran across each other. His hair was all white now, but it was red back then. Like I said, it was funny. It was insane. Because of that background, we would and do always joke around with each other and tell each other straight to the face. We didn't pull punches. If either of us were looking like we're out of shape, we would call each other a fat fuck. Hell, even if we were in shape, we would still call each other a fat fuck. Though my ass did look fat in those jeans. All right, that's it for today. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, you can reach me at dyingtoretirepodcast@gmail.com. As always, I'm Doug. This is Dying to Retire, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.